Hi, everyone. This is Ankit, and I am here to present my talk at the Bug Bounty Village this year. I'll be talking on my top three findings in Bug Bounty. And to start with, I have a presentation that will go through multiple things. Just to start with my talk, I like to briefly introduce myself. So I kindly take off a lot of interest in web, IoT, and mobile application security. I've been bug bounty hunting in last couple of years and have been featured in different Hall of Fames, including General Motors, EFF, STC, Mobivic, AT&T, PagerDuty, and some more. I've also been speaking at different conferences like RSA, APAC, DeepSec Austria, AWS, UG, and B-Sites Delhi, B-Sites Ahmedabad, and a couple of more. And also at local community events like OWASP and Null Delhi NCR chapter. I'm also an active reader and I kind of write answers on Quora. At the same time, I've recently picked up the hobby of being a YouTuber. So I kind of create videos in tech, travel, and infosec. I'll share the link at the end of my presentation. So yeah, talking about today's talk, let's see a brief agenda. So we'll be looking at some interesting vulnerabilities and how exactly they were found, their impact, and their remediation. Also to the fact that what is generally the thought process behind finding such bugs. Also, like how these bugs are a little different from day-to-day reported vulnerabilities like input validation, XSS, SQL injection, and stuff like that. And I'll also try and explain how one should plan, target, and approach vulnerabilities in any kind of scenario, be it a pen test, be it a bug bounty program. Similarly, I'll also be talking about what generically a difference between a pen test and a bug bounty from a security researcher's perspective. So yeah, to begin with, let's start with talking about the vulnerabilities that we have today. So I'll be talking about three vulnerabilities. I've reported multiple vulnerabilities across multiple platform and programs, but these are the top three that I could pick at the moment. And they go like this. The first one being a logical DOS, the second one being a DOS in Android application, and then another one being an CSRF on an unauthenticated page. So yeah, let's talk about the vulnerability, which is like a DOS is Android application. So this Android application goes by the name Zero, and it was hosted on HackerOne back in 2016. It had couple of activities, and in Android, you can always check for what kind of activities are allowed to be exported. Like when I say activity, all these screens that you see inside Android application are basically activities like a login screen, like an profile screen. So those are activities. Inside the application, there is a Android manifest file that contains what kind of uh, attributes are defined for that particular activity. So ideally, there should be an export equal to false for most of the critical activities. But in this case, there were two activities that were defined as exported equal to true. What essentially that means is that any other application on the same device can actually go ahead and invoke these activities. So this was one of the problem. Now we'll see why exactly are we calling it a problem. So let's say what could have been an attack scenario in this case. So suppose Alex is a user of this application and he has installed this application on his phone. Now he logs into the application and starts to make some transactions, starts to do something inside the app. Now the attacker has actually lured him to install another application, maybe something like an malicious application or something like that. Now that malicious application can actually trigger activity inside the Zero application, which is a kill switch activity. The kill switch activity is more of like activity which kills the whole application. It gives a prompt telling the user that the application has stopped working and the application comes to a halt. So I'll quickly show you a POC of the same, like a working video demo that will make things a little more easy. So if you see, this is a screenshot of Quark, which is like an exploitation framework for mobile applications. It shows that unfortunately Zero has stopped. So this is basically the kill switch activity that got triggered. So we'll look at the video for better clarity. So yep. So let's consider the fact that on the right hand side, this is the victim's phone, and this is the Quark application. In this case, it could also be done by multiple things. So let's just start this video. So the user goes, opens the Zero application, and yeah, I'll just go ahead and log into the application. No worries, the password can be shared because this account is no more active. So once we sign into the application, we'll be greeted with an authentication page. I'll just shift the screen a little so that it becomes more visible. It asks you for a security code. You can always skip this step, and you will be able to see the screen wherein your account information will be loaded. So yep, you can see a couple of bank account detail and all of that. On the other hand, if I just go and launch Quark or QARK, the exploitation framework, uh, yeah, so essentially we are going to enter some information and create an invoice in this application. And then on the other hand, we are triggering activity. So yeah, I'll just let it proceed. I'll just enter some information, and you can see that there is something which says that unfortunately Zero has stopped. When it is like Zero has stopped, we essentially use the exploit application to launch the activity. If you see here, the exported component, the Zero kill switch activity, and in this case, the application kind of crashed, which you just saw, right? Once you enter the information, yeah, the application crashes. Now, this could have even been done through an ADB command, or it could be done by an alternate application inside your phone. So there could be multiple ways of doing it, and we'll see what all other methods can an attacker use, right? So talking about a functioning exploit, as I showed you, you can create an exploit using QARK or Quark. This is an open source tool from LinkedIn. You can find it on GitHub. So to connect to the application, you can basically just start an activity manager. So this is the ADB command I have mentioned, start -n, and then the package name or the application name, and then the activity name. So this is the activity name, something like new get shopping activities. This could be the kill switch activity in this case. So this is one way of doing it. Now the next part, which becomes very interesting and mindful to note, is that explaining the impact. So you should always mention that this kill switch activity can be triggered from another application, and this would hamper the user's experience because every time they'll be using the application, there will be this error coming onto the screen, and the application will crash. And what if it happens multiple number of times? Because you can always write a script to execute this particular activity, like recursively, which will eventually make it almost impossible for the user to use this application, and eventually turn it into a denial of service. Now, explaining the impact, I would say that this is basically insecure permission set on a particular component of the Android application, but its impact results into a denial of service. Remediation could have been very simple. They could have set the exported attribute to false for this particular activity. And yeah, I have mentioned the HackerOne report URL, so you can always read about the report later. All right. So before we go to the CSRF thing, I'll quickly go to the first finding, which is like a logical DOS. Uh, yep. So when I say logical DOS, let me move this a little. Yes. So yeah. So a logical DOS in service request creation. So there was this e-commerce application. Talking about the functionality, there was a page that allowed users to create a service request. Now this service request can be created for any user. Like I can create it for anybody's behalf by entering their email address. That is one of the flaw, but we'll see how it becomes even more critical. So anybody can create a ticket using somebody else's email ID without any authentication. And this is again way back in 2015. So this used to be the only way to reach out to the customer support team in case of an account lockout or change in account information record or something like that. And I'll show you a little glimpse of the application as well. So talking about the proof of concept, this is how the page looked like. You can select what kind of help you are looking for. You may write my account. You can give somebody's email address and the mobile number. Mobile number could be any random number. They do not use to validate the number or something like that. Talking about the attack scenario, the service request creation had a limit. Like if you are creating a ticket, you can only create a single ticket in 2 days. So you cannot create more than one ticket in 48 hours. So this kind of rate limiting was set. But eventually gaining access to anybody's email address or knowing somebody's email address is not a tough task, right? So anybody can eventually create a lot of tickets on somebody else's behalf and bar them from creating an account service request for the next 48 hours. Now what I can do in this case, I can go ahead and try and log into their account using some incorrect password multiple times, log their account, and then create a dummy or a fake request, like a service request, which eventually will mean that the attacker is barring a user from using the application. Talking about the impact, right? So this was the attack scenario, and the impact is very related. So an attacker can basically take anybody's email address, log their account by entering the incorrect password, right? Now they'll use the same email address, create a fake service request. Now the victim account is logged. He can't even raise a request to revoke the user account for next 48 hours. And thus the user is getting denied to use the application for next 2 days. Remember, this is not in today's time. This is 5 years back. So there used to be time wherein account lockouts used to be there for 24 hours, 48 hours, something like that. And the application did not had anything like a reset password functionality or reactivate the account or something. So those kind of functionality were not there at that time, at least for this application. So yeah, talking about impact at a much larger scale. So any attacker can actually take a list of users. First, this particular page, they can lock out multiple users. They'll create multiple service requests for multiple people. And then this kind of a attack can be used to do a mass denial of service for applications user base, eventually meaning into organizations financial revenue loss and trust among its users, which is kind of a big loss for the organization. The end result, so this happened in one of the application called as Mobivic, and they kind of awarded me with some kind of reward and name on their wall of fame. So you can see my name on the fourth number. So that is how this whole attack scenario happened. This we have already discussed, DOS in an Android application. So I'll move back to the third and the last vulnerability, which is CSRF on an unauthenticated page. We have mentioned it as an unauthenticated page. First, I'll try and explain what the whole scenario was. So there was this travel related organization. They were running a referral campaign where one has to ask people to register. So if I have to win some kind of a goodie or to win this competition, I have to get an invite code of myself and then ask people to register on their platform using my invite code. Now, when anybody will come and register, they need to enter my invite code, their email address, and their contact number, right? But for anybody to be winning this, they need to get the maximum registration done for their unique invite code, right? But this page on which the whole thing was done, like the registration was being done, does not had any kind of authentication in place. No authentication, no mobile number verification, no captcha. So this is how the page looked like. This is how the functionality looked like. And now we'll see what kind of an attack is possible on this kind of an application. So this is how the application looked. This is on one of the India's biggest backpacking application platforms, and you can see full name, email, referral code, and city. So I try and explain the attack scenario. So since the page has no rate limiting or brute force protection enabled, I'll fuzz the application parameters. Like I'll take a list of random name and a list of valid email addresses. Again, getting uh, a list of email addresses is not a big task. And I'll just fuzz it using my particular invite code and some random name and random contact number. Uh, I'll eventually get multiple registrations done with my invite code, and thus surpassing any legitimate participant for this event. Now I'll tell you how exactly I'm saying this would happen, or how exactly this will result into an impact. So this competition was happening in a span of 48 hours. They opened this window, and in a span of 48 hours, you have to get maximum registrations done. Now, at the end of the competition, the maximum registration will be seen, and they will be announced the winner. So top three winners will be getting a premium membership of their platform. Now, on the attacker's side, what the attacker can do, there used to be a dashboard where you can see all number of registration from all other cities and participants. So you'll get a clear idea of what the participants registration numbers are, and the attacker will just do that kind of a fuzzing that it just surpasses the legitimate users by a small margin using burp intruder, which is like a very easy way of intruding or attacking a particular parameter inside the application, and thus automating this whole task. Now, suppose there are two users who have done like 500 registrations each. Maybe somebody has done 520, somebody has done 501. The attacker can eventually do 530 registrations by just running this tool for say 5, 10, 15 minutes without any manual effort, without the application doing anything. And since the results have to be declared in such a short span, they can only see if there are registrations being done or not, but eventually they were not seeing if the registrations are coming from the same place or not. So that kind of rate limiting or double verification was missing. Thus the attacker can eventually deny the legitimate users to win this competition, which eventually could have meant that there was no competition, because there was one competition happening between legitimate users trying to get legitimate registrations on the application platform, while on the other hand an attacker can just take up some fake and dummy email addresses, names and all that, and first the application get the maximum registration and win their premium membership. So yeah, the end result, reporting to the application team and acknowledgement, that is what I did. I did not actually went ahead and abuse the application to win this particular premium membership. So yeah, this was one case wherein there could have been a CSRF token on this page. If there would have been a CSRF token in place, which could have expired after each and every request, anybody could have only been able to do one registration at a time. For every new registration, you have to refresh the page or get a new CSRF token, or maybe even a CAPTCHA. Whenever you used to enter a detail, there used to be a human verification. Then this attack could have been avoided, which eventually was not there in place. Now talking about a similar use case, although on an authenticated application, not on this particular application, this is just for reference. So there used to be an application which used to take booking for cruise, and this cruise used to allow other like once you have done a booking, like you can see there is itinerary and there is an option to book. Now you can select the number of guests and their profile information like age, sex and name, right? But what I can do, there was no CSRF protection on this particular page. Now I'll tell you how a very simple technical vulnerability can be shown into a business impact. So anybody can go ahead and do a booking, and the booking IDs can be taken up. They used to be sequential, so there wasn't any problem there. So anybody can pick up those booking IDs and create a crafted CSRF request and send it to somebody. Now, I am trying to tell you a scenario where I can deny somebody from getting boarded on a cruise. So while there was a profile information page with name, sex, gender, and all that, there used to be a column wherein for females you have to define if you are pregnant or not, because these are long cruises. They do not allow pregnant women at a particular like a week cycle to board the cruise. So eventually you can set an particular female from somebody else's family as marked being as pregnant, and they'll not get to know this till the point they actually go ahead and try and board the cruise, but they will be denied because they do not allow boarding of any such customer or passenger. So that could be a real life case of having or missing out on CSRF, and thus causing a lot of damage to their user and the user based functionality based on the application type. So yeah, so this application allowed booking to their cruise and had a CSRF token missing on this page. They could have like, as I explained, what can an attacker do by modifying the booking request, because a lot of people might feel that there is not much that can be done, right? Because you're just modifying somebody's request, you're not stealing money and all that, but somebody has paid for it and you can deny them from traveling. That is also like hampering the whole functionality, hampering the whole flow of the application. So yeah, these were the three vulnerabilities that I wanted to demonstrate. And now talking about the importance of this research. So I kind of saw in a lot of bug bounty platform, defining the impact while reporting vulnerability is a very big thing. Like, it's a very significant factor and a lot of people miss. They just find some flaw and they report it. They are more or involved in the technical aspect, but I think explaining the impact is one of the most significant things, because for an organization, they want to know what damage that particular vulnerability can do to them. And then the second thing is the art of creating chain of attacks. Say for example, I found a kill switch activity, that is one vulnerability, but reaching up to a point wherein I can deny users from using the application using that vulnerability requires an art, wherein you are creating a chain of attacks and you are increasing the severity of the whole vulnerability. So that is one thing that you can apply onto your bug bounty journey, and you will get more reward, or at least your findings will make more meaning to the organizations, because they are just not looking for the technical findings, they are looking to understand what kind of an impact will that vulnerability be there for their application, be it web, mobile, or anything else. So yeah, so during this research, what I wanted to also highlight, that a lot of people always look for hunting for highly complex or difficult to find vulnerabilities. Rather, if they can just understand the business logic of the application and try and abuse the most critical action possible in the application, this will help them in finding the highest impact of vulnerabilities, or finding vulnerabilities with the highest impact possible, or doing the maximum damage possible. So yeah, there are two more points that I would quickly cover. That is how to target and approach vulnerabilities, and difference between pen test and bug bounty. So how to plan? So very simple and basic way is understanding the application first. Do not jump into finding input validation flaws, session related flaws. First, understand the application, its use, what's the business logic, what kind of user base it caters to, and understand each and every functionality before you start to test the application. The second point should be always looking at the application from an attacker's perspective, and while you're doing the reconnaissance on the application, make a list of interesting areas and URL endpoints to test. Suppose you find a page wherein you can create users, make a note of that page and see if you can test it for privilege escalation. So that should be an approach to before even starting to test the application. The next step should be focusing on specific parts. So always identify the parts wherein you will be investing more time, rather than jumping from different pages and different issues. I've seen a lot of people trying and hunt for all the issues possible, which eventually means that they are not able to concentrate on particular or some specific high impact bugs. So always focus on few parts, invest some more time into those areas, and maybe then do some low hanging fruits and some easy to find vulnerabilities later. Yeah. Now the next thing being what generically difference between a pen test and a bug bounty. So while in a pen test, you kind of try and cover all kind of vulnerabilities. On the other hand, the focus is on finding high severity findings in a bug bounty. And then secondly, in a pen test, you try and cover all vulnerabilities, including basic security practices missing, low level fruits, and low level findings, and all of that. But in pen test or in a bug bounty, people are always looking to find the highest impact bug first. The next comparison or next difference I would like to say is, while pen test is more of a slow and a steady race, you get 5-8 days to test an application. You make a defined approach, you clear your expectation, you analyze the application, you get a walkthrough, you take your time. It is a slow and steady race. You try and focus more on delivering good results. While on the other hand, a bug bounty is like a fast and a whoever reaches first, right? So even if you have reported excesses, which is like more tricky to find, but somebody has already reported it, you won't be getting anything in return, maybe a duplicate report or something. So it's always a fast and whoever wins or reaches there first. So it is basically a fast and first to reach race. There could be much more differences. There are obviously much more differences, but this is just a gist of how I see it as a security researcher. So just to help you with these kind of more findings, there are a couple of resources or references I've shared that you can refer to. You can always read more on by yourself, but these are some DOS in applications, some logical DOS, some DOS in Android applications and things like that, or maybe CSRF protection missing on unauthenticated pages and things like that. So you can always read them post the talk. Talking about the crux, like what is the crux of this whole talk, what you can take home. So these are some glimpses of few bugs that I was able to find in my short stint in bug bounty hunting. There are so many bugs out there in the wild to be hunted, and the intent is here to highlight the fact that being a successful bug bounty hunter is more about the approach and thinking out of the box than only being limited to technical capabilities. So there are more critical and relevant bugs we wish to we could have presented in our presentation, and they can still be tested and applied to different organization and their respective application. So go out there, hunt for these vulnerabilities more, and maybe you will be able to find still the same vulnerabilities existing in the current lot of applications. So with that, I'll end my talk, and thank you so much for giving time. And I really appreciate the fact that you attended this talk. I've given my social media profile links at the end of this presentation slide, so you can always refer to it later. So have a great day, everyone. Bye.